Welcome back, everyone. This is Just the Worst Movie Review Podcast, episode number 14 to be perfectly precise. And as usual, I'm your host, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at joeblow.com. This is Infamous, and of course, right here at Just the Worst Podcast. And this is going to be our very last episode of 2015. We're actually getting it in like right under the wire to talk about a couple of films that are opening in limited release, opening a little bit wider as we go from 2015 to 2016, and as we head into the new year, that you'll be able to start to find at your theaters with a little harder looking, but they will start to expand in the coming weeks. But at least as we transition from 2015 to 2016, kind of want to get them on your radar. And as we do every single week here on the show, like to bring in a brand new film critic, someone new, a different voice, a different perspective, a different point of view to kind of give you the lay of land and offer up a different idea of what's out there, so we don't give you kind of the same mindset. Somebody different to offer up what they think of what's out there in the theaters. So joining us this week, you can find his work at mtime.com. He's also a member of the LA Film Critics Association. I've been trying to get him on for like a couple of weeks now, and finally we've been able to make it work. So Todd Gilchrist joining us. Todd, thank you very much, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to join you to talk about these two movies in particular.
Yeah, we got two really, really good ones this week. So on the docket this week, we're going to be talking about The Revenant and Anomalisa. So we'll get into them a little bit more in depth in just a few moments. But before we get started, I want to kind of give you the opportunity to let everybody know kind of where you've come from for a while and how long you've been at this. Because as we mention all the time to kind of open the show, and everybody always asks us, even the people we bring onto the show, they go, why did you bring me onto a show called Just the Worst Movie Review Podcast? And it's because, look, everybody always wants to be the most amazing, most grand, most excellent, most phenomenal podcast that's out there. We don't really need to fight for that title. So we'll take the title that nobody wants, which is at the other end of the spectrum, being a little self-deprecating. And we'll be good at that, kind of set the bar a little bit low and surprise you with expectations once we kind of exceed them with relative ease. So so we don't bring on just the worst. We bring on people who do know what they're talking about and who have been at this. So Todd, let everybody know kind of how long you've been at this as far as writing about film criticism and like.
Sure. Well, I've been writing about film criticism since I was in the 8th grade. So I guess that would be about, I don't know, to 30 years, something like that. But I started professionally in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I'm from originally. And I wrote about mostly music, but some film stuff there, and then moved around. But I've been writing about film in Los Angeles since 2001. And, basically I spent a good, 10 years sort of, very much as a journeyman, sort of writing for any and everybody. I mean, I started out, I worked for 3 or 4 years for IGN as their DVD critic, and then also as a film writer for them. And then went on, I've written for the trades. I've written for Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, Wall Street Journal, Forbes. And then, just about almost any site you can imagine. I've written for Joe Blow. I've written for tons and tons of different sites. And then I started in April of last year. That's 2014 for mtime.com, which is a Chinese language entertainment site. And, to answer the questions that I always get, no, I don't speak or write in Chinese. And yes, someone else translates my articles into Chinese, and so I really don't have any idea what they say once I send them off. So I'm assuming that I am really on the forefront of China's inevitable conquering of the United States. I'm just trying to sort of get in on the forefront of that so that I can be sort of a dignitary, hopefully, when they inevitably take over the box office and everything else. But basically, I do the same thing for them that I would do for any domestic outlet, which is to say that I do interviews, I do reviews. Right before the holiday, I published a roundup of roundtable quotes for the Hateful Eight, for example. But then I also wrote a review, coincidentally, for Anomalisa. So it really just depends on what's popular here, actually, much more so than what's popular there, because not everything opens there currently. So they have me sort of help determine and set the tone a little bit on our site about what our readers are interested in there, because they have a surprisingly robust appetite for Western entertainment, in particular movies.
It's nice to see that at least one of us is forward thinking. The rest of us are just stuck in like, whoa, what's going on with Star Wars? And you have now seen the light and said, but China is already dominating us. The United States is almost an afterthought at the box office globally, to an extent, with everything else opening in these larger markets now. So it's nice to know that you'll be leaving us behind in the dust sooner rather than later. Just remember who had you on the podcast lately.
I will. It's funny because I have basically 3 colleagues here in Los Angeles who work with me, and we communicate with an editorial team in China. And 2 of those people are good longtime friends of mine. One of whom I wrote with in college. So I've known him for about 20 years, and I brought them in, and so I think we're probably going to form. And I'm probably sorry to say it, given our my baseline intelligence and their much more considerable skill and intelligence. We're going to be running things soon, so I'm just saying anyone who's listening to this should it behooves them to cozy up to us at their earliest convenience.
Yeah, I would say to maybe start getting into that. Yeah, because the United States is kind of a mess right now when it comes to the entertainment aspect. We're just eating. We're just cannibalizing ourselves. That's like the Wild West out there right now. It's wide open.
It really is. It really is. I mean, our readership, if it tells you anything, is about 160 million uniques a month, and so our site actually does a lot of different things. I mean, they do ticket sales. We're sort of like an IMDb along with our sort of entertainment reporting. We actually do merchandising and other things as well. But it's one of these things where no one has heard of us, and I would bet that the vast majority, if not all of your listeners, probably have never heard of M-Time, and yet in China, I say this with no false modesty. I laugh at the prospect that our company CEO comes to Los Angeles and he goes, you guys are sort of like celebrities there because they read your stuff all the time, and I'm like, get out of here. I mean, I assume. I accept a certain amount of anonymity, and also that a few people like you, Billy, might know who I am based on my writing or being on social media or whatever. But I certainly don't think of myself as much of a big deal. And he's like, no, it's like people will know who you guys are, and I'm just like, okay, And thus far, when we've been to China, which I've been a couple of times, I haven't been mobbed, Richard Lester, Hard Day's Night style, but I'm hoping that maybe in the next year or two that will start happening. In which case, then I'll start really thinking I'm a big deal, and you might have to start paying me more than the glass of water that I was offered to come on the podcast today. So.
Well, I've always wanted to be a rock star, so time to start brushing up on my Mandarin.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's Todd's credentials for the most part. So, like I said, not just some Joe Schmo we pulled off the street. Not that there's anything wrong with you having an opinion. We just happen to use a podcast to be able to wield that opinion. So, with that said, let's get into the films that are on the docket this week, and we're going to start with The Revenant. The Revenant is the latest film from Alejandro Inarritu, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hardy, Domhnall Gleeson, and Will Poulter, and is inspired by the experiences of the real-life frontiersman Hugh Glass, telling the story of his quest for survival when he's left for dead out in the wilderness, fueled by the need for revenge and retribution over the death of his son. DiCaprio plays Glass, and it's pretty much Leonardo DiCaprio out in the snowy wilderness, for the most part by himself, foaming and seething at the mouth, just itching to get back to civilization in order to try and take another man's life. This one has been kind of, I think it opened in limited release on Christmas Day, and now through the weeks, as it's trying to build up its Oscar campaign, will now be opening wider as we go. So as far as story-wise, The Revenant is pretty basic on the surface. But what did The Revenant do anything more than kind of the most basic things for you?
I mean, my first reaction to it, as when I was sort of asked about it, was that I found it impressive and admirable, much more so than, say, enjoyable or immersive. It's a very visceral experience. I think it's very effective. I think it's technically very well done, but it doesn't, given the fact that it's 2.5 hours, to me, I feel like it hits kind of the same nail on the head multiple times, and it works, but it didn't resonate emotionally with me in a way that I kind of wished that it had, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it's really long. And look, and I don't usually wield running time as a criticism with a movie, where some people just look at it and go, well, how long is it? It's too long. I'm not gonna like it. So that's that's not where I'm coming from. But when a movie feels its length, like when you're watching it and it feels like you're there for a long time, to the point that like you're just aware that things are moving incredibly slowly. Not a lot is always happening. It is a very bloated film. I think there's a tighter film in here somewhere that I think would make it slightly more effective. But yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, look, I would probably never go back and watch this film. I think once is enough. And there are a number of sequences that you just feel like the same thing, kind of after DiCaprio is left for dead and he's coming back, and, he's fighting his way back. He's fighting to survive. There's a lot of him just setting up camp. Like, he just sets up camp and he spends a night, and then he moves on, sets up another camp.
I mean, I guess my feeling about it is that, it is a survival tale, and I think that it absolutely underscores how bleak and sort of unforgiving the frontier was at that time. I mean, notwithstanding his own sort of personal vendetta, I think that it very effectively explores how difficult it is to survive. And this is a person who actually has acquired the skills in order to do that in a landscape that is brutal and pretty terrifying for many more reasons than just bear attacks, which is I assume we'll talk in more detail about. But to me, I do think that when you're watching it for 2.5 hours and you're like, oh my God, this is just sort of unimaginable to have to survive. At a certain point, you're watching someone, encounter, one thing after another. And without, I would say, a deeper thematic resonance than, sort of the idea of really putting an actor through the paces of dealing with these things, within reason, of course. I understand that they did have, at least I read that they had, like wetsuits to keep them warm underneath their costumes and things like that. So it wasn't like Leonardo DiCaprio was like left for dead for whatever amount of time it took to film The Revenant. But I do think that it lacks a certain kind of emotionality for me that makes each of those new challenges that he faces so compelling that I want to see this movie for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean the aspect of him, trying to seek revenge and retribution is there, but there are times when it kind of just goes away. And I think the film doesn't really drive it home as well as it possibly could to make, everything that he's going through so worth it. Is the relationship that he has with his son is there, early on. But you don't, once again, because of the fact that we're in this sort of, wilderness setting and he's basically a guide. He's trying to help a hunting party kind of maneuver around and, get their pelts back and navigate the wilderness, watch out for the Native Americans who are out there that he has some familiarity with. And I think the relationship with his son isn't built very strongly early on. It's kind of just like, he's protecting him, or he's looking out for him in a little bit of a way of like, well, don't get involved with these people. Keep your mouth shut. Like they don't like your kind, which is, his son is half Native American at that point. And as a result, I think that is kind of lacking the emotionality of it. Like if you felt like this close connection to it, and it didn't necessarily feel so cold. I think that's one of the things with the movie is the movie feels cold, not just literally, but figuratively as well. Then maybe that adding just a little bit of warmth to it would have his struggle resonate with you a little bit further. As a human being, as a parent, as a child yourself, who could identify with what he's going through, recognize it, and say, yeah, I'm along with this journey because I would suffer through the exact same thing in order to reach similar goals.
Sure. I mean, I think for me, not to jump ahead too far, but, I think for me that the problem primarily is in Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu's filmmaking. I without getting into a long critique of Birdman, that's a movie to me that is very self-congratulatory about its determination to sort of make fun of a bid for someone to do something quote unquote important, and it's a very strange and contradictory project to me. But watching this as a follow-up, kind of to me like only reiterates sort of that Inarritu is a very ambitious filmmaker, but he's also a filmmaker who very clearly wants to be appreciated for those ambitions. And this to me is sort of like the ultimate thing. I think thankfully it's a more direct goal for him with this one. It's not, that one was, I think, trying to be a little subversive, but The Revenant to me is like him going like, look what I can do, what I can film, what I can subject an actor to for this incredible visceral journey. And what he's accomplished is something that is incredibly impressive. It's technically, it's so unbelievably well photographed and well made that's sort of indisputable. And yet it sort of rings hollow to me because I feel like it's all about sort of accomplishing this thing much more so than about telling a story that to me resonates more deeply than like it's cold as shit and it's wet and it's unforgiving and it's punishing, and we let Leonardo DiCaprio, who is one of our biggest actors, go do all those things.
Yeah, the Birdman. See, Birdman connected with me much more closely. Some of the themes that Birdman tried to address as far as adoration and love and some of those ideas, they hit me a little bit more, and I could see I could understand what Michael Keaton and that character were going through, trying to fight for relevance in a world in that film. This film doesn't really give me anything to connect to with this guy other than, like I said, a very simplistic, very surface level revenge story. But once again, that revenge story kind of just fades away, and yeah, you just have Leonardo DiCaprio just suffering and being punished for long stretches. Now, look, that doesn't mean that I didn't like the film. I do, I think impressive is probably one of the best ways to describe it. And there are some really incredible sequences in this film that will just grip you immediately. But I think the film sort of felt a little empty emotionally. So while you're watching it and it's beautiful to look at, and like I said, there's a few sequences that are just, you're like, wow. And I think even DiCaprio, just kind of like seething and limping, and there's a certain amount of respect you could give to an actor for putting themselves through that, putting it all out there for their performance, and I would compare this to sort of DiCaprio's Wolf of Wall Street performance, in that those were kind of the two where you kind of he showed his more physical side, I guess.
Yes.
Wolf of Wall Street, he showed a capacity for physical, sort of almost slapsticky comedy, which is something that you would never really see from him. Here, once again, he puts it all out there as far as just using his face, using his body, using his physical attributes to get the most out of the performance. So in that respect, I look at that and I say, wow, once again. But yeah, as we kind of have said, I think there's something just missing. There's a spark missing from this movie that when you watch it, like you go along for the ride. You'll go along for the ride because you paid your money and you're inside and you're already there. But I just think it's lacking that something that just grabs a hold of you and pulls you into it.
No, absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that. I mean, it sounds like we're damning it with faint praise, perhaps. But to me, I really do think that it's a spectacular technical achievement, and I mean, I think it is a compelling story, but I think that it lacks, whatever X factor, if it's a sort of thematic note or something emotional that makes the visceral become something a little more transcendent. I mean, by comparison, Birdman is all theme and conceptualization. And so when you have a character in that movie who is a former, blockbuster actor who is trying to mount a career resurgence by taking on a vanity project, which will net him some critical credibility and also hopefully some commercial clout, regain that. So they're sort of making fun of him trying to do that. I mean, when you have a conversation with a critic who, notwithstanding my feeling about that scene, who essentially is confirming that, who essentially calls him out for that. I find that to be a very interesting idea. Although, again, I think that the movie wants to be congratulated for having explored that or written that. Whereas this movie is going, well, the actual experience of it being made is the thing that we are mostly focused on, or that is the most important to us. And so as a result, the story is very simple, or comparatively simple, straightforward. It's not, I was actually grateful to a certain extent that they didn't try to make it more spiritual. I was a little concerned that it would sort of ape Terrence Malick or somebody like that, where it has that sort of spiritual, ethereal quality, whereas this is very brutal, and very straightforward. And so I like that, and I like the movie as a whole. I mean, I thought it was, like I said, impressive. Is the first adjective I would use to describe it. And at the same time, it just didn't resonate for me in a deeper way. And quite frankly, not that I think this makes me right, but I mean, I have found in my discussions with other critics and other film goers that their response has been the same. I mean, I think, there's a reason that it's sort of Oscar buzz has primarily been focused on technical categories and in DiCaprio's performance rather than, say, maybe screenplay, or something like that. And I think it's an amazing movie to experience. I think you definitely should see it on the biggest screen possible, and to look at what it offers visually is undeniable. But I also think that for me, it just didn't sort of convert into a thing that I felt, say, devastated by, or I felt completely swept up in as I was watching.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, as we talk about the things that we like about it, immediately we just turn around and backhand it a second. And we're like, yeah, I like it. And, these things work for me. But then there are these things that didn't. And it's that kind of movie. And the interesting, another interesting part for me about the film is that the moments that I think get the most emotional responses of the film don't actually involve Leonardo DiCaprio. I think there's a much more interesting and intriguing story being told when we kind of cut to Tom Hardy and Will Poulter and their journey, their half of it. Because the way it's set up is, Tom Hardy is like, he's just kind of this blue collar worker. Like, he's out there, he's hunting. He wants to get paid. He wants his money. He did his work. Look, we got attacked by Native Americans. We have to escape. All right, but we're leaving all that money out there. And his idea is, somebody's got to pay for this. Somebody's responsible for this. It's not me. It's not an MP. It's a YP. I just want my money. And, and he holds DiCaprio responsible in a number of ways. So even when DiCaprio is wounded by bear attack, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, he doesn't, this is still putting him out. We're going to have to carry this guy. Well, it's going to take us twice as long, and it's going to be more difficult. We got to get paid. Like that, his focus is, I need to get paid. What about me? It's all about, it's the American dream right there. What about me? No sense of community. How does this affect me? So, once he kind of eliminates DiCaprio's son, and then ultimately decides to leave DiCaprio for dead, thinking that he's not going to survive. Like, he's too bad. He's not going to make it. The elements will take care of him anyway. And I'll be free and clear. Going back to him along the way, trying to justify all of his actions. And reason why they did what they did, how this is good for him and Will Poulter, who's there with him, who is struggling once he kind of learns the truth of what happened, with how this affects him. There's an ethical dilemma within him, and I think those are the interesting parts. Where you get something with some emotionality to it, is looking at Tom Hardy, and it reminds you of what happened. So you're not getting any of that from DiCaprio. You're getting it from looking at the guy who you're like, oh, what an asshole. Yeah, I hope he does come back and get you. So, that's what, kind of stokes the fire within you watching it. And then I think the Poulter journey is just interesting because there's something working in his head. He's troubled by everything that's happening. And not that I would have liked to see more of them. I think they're cut well within the film, but I think theirs is actually the more interesting journey than just DiCaprio, who's just like setting up camp, moving on, just one step closer to redemption.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the way that the film points out sort of the self-interest of each person in the film, or at least their sort of preoccupations, is very interesting. I mean, you look at the Native American characters who are, it's a chief who's in pursuit of white settlers who he doesn't know, or someone he doesn't know, who has kidnapped his daughter. And I mean, it's interesting because those characters are completely brutal and violent, and at the same time, their quest is is very noble, or at least sympathetic. And I think that it handles that kind of challenge really well. I do think Tom Hardy's sort of pragmatism is pretty interesting, and Will Poulter sort of his equivocating on why we're doing this, how we're doing this, how I feel about this. I think that's also very interesting. Actually, what I really liked was that there's a certain point where Domhnall Gleeson, who gives a really great performance in the movie. I mean, his determination is to meet justice on this Tom Hardy character. When he learns that Leonardo DiCaprio's character has been left for dead, and the fact that the movie is not indifferent to a world that as it is settling, as it is becoming more sophisticated, there are people who believe in upholding a certain letter of law, and whereas like you would think that it might end up where, let's say, I'm making up a random scenario to not spoil the movie to people who have not seen it yet, but like if Leonardo DiCaprio walks into camp at the end of the movie and everybody just is like, "Oh yeah, your son is dead. That sucks. Sorry to hear that," and no one sort of takes up his story, then I think that would be that might be the kiss of death for the movie in a way, because it's so brutal and unforgiving. But there is a moment where this person who's sort of been in charge is like, listen, this guy has done right by us, we're going to do right by him. And there's something very sort of ennobling about that in that moment that I think makes it more poignant for me.
Yeah, and all the depth, all the complexities on the periphery in the movie, it's all in the secondary characters. DiCaprio is, his journey is pretty basic. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's survive and get revenge. Like that's it, and there's not much to it. And I think that's one of the bigger failings of the film is just like there is not much to it. Even as he's out there, there's not really a lot of introspection. Which I think might have added just another layer to his character. There's not a lot of like, could I have done anything differently? Is this my fault? Which I think, allowing us to live in his head a little bit might have made it a much more just interesting character to spend that much time with,
Sure.
As opposed to kind of just like, well, I gotta eat and I gotta have this tauntaun moment so I don't freeze, and it spends so much time on the survival aspect that it never really lets you know what he's thinking, what he's feeling along the way. It's more just, basic human survival instinct kicking in. And I wish there would have been just more to that in order to kind of give us just a better understanding of who Hugh Glass is throughout the film. Let's talk about the bear attack, since that's kind of the centerpiece of the film, or one of the major centerpieces of the film. It's not a bear sexual assault. It's not a bear rape. It's bear attack. A bear attacks this guy, and yeah, I mean, this is something like unlike anything I can recall ever seeing in a film, where this grizzly bear protecting her cubs just goes ballistic and just, I mean, she fucks shit up when it comes to DiCaprio, and it's an amazing sequence to watch as it's happening. Just both both visually, it's incredible to watch. You know, how are they doing this? This is amazing. Is that a real bear? You know, like they're able to blur the lines and blend it so well that you get lost in that moment. And it's incredible few minutes of this movie.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's certainly the showstopper of the movie. And looking at, Inarritu again, he working with Emmanuel Lubezki, they are sort of peerless collaborators when it comes to being able to pull off this stuff, particularly if, look after Birdman, which was such an enormous technical challenge. But to watch this sequence, which I'm like fairly certain was, all shot. I mean, it was composited as one take. I don't know if it was actually shot all in one take, but it looks like a continuous shot of Leonardo DiCaprio fighting off a bear attack. Is one of the most amazing things you will see on film or on DCP this year. I mean, it's such a remarkable, such a painful thing to watch happen, and it really does look absolutely incredible, because it's not just, it doesn't look like, oh, well, we have Leonardo DiCaprio's face like stapled onto a CGI body that's getting, thrown around or whatever. I mean, you're watching like him lay and you have a super close up of his face next to where the bear has slashed his back or something like that. It's just, it's really just a phenomenal sequence. I mean, taking absolutely nothing away from it.
Yeah, you have those moments in films, in lesser films, where you're thrown out of the moment. You're thrown out of your suspension of disbelief because what it looks like visually is so distracting. You see the seams in a number of ways. The magic is kind of gone because you recognize and notice how fake something may look, or how something may look not there. This is not that at all. This looks like it's there, like it's really happening. And I think that's one of the moments where you are kind of sucked into what's happening, because how do you detach from something like that? Like it's incredibly difficult to just detach from a moment like that happening without, in that moment throwing yourself into DiCaprio. Like, oh my God, this is happening. This is horrible. And losing yourself in those moments. And, and those are, as we kind of backhand compliment throughout the rest of the film, this is one of those moments where, like, you really can't. You look at it and you go, nope, if you're going to see it, like, this is actually one of those reasons that you would see it, even just for a short sequence like this, to be just amazed and just kind of marvel at this sequence. It could be worth the price of admission alone just to watch this thing unfold.
Yeah, it's funny because I was fortunate when I saw the film. I saw one of the first screenings here in Los Angeles, and I was not really privy to the fact that there was going to be this bear attack sequence, and it was such a amazing surprise to me, because you watch the sequence and really, like, even if you have something like that in a movie, like, it typically doesn't go on as long and in such detail as what happens in the movie. We're obviously talking about it at this point and people know about it, so it's not like it's a surprise anymore. But I mean, that was one of, I think, the great values of seeing it early. Was it was one of the few times where I was like really kind of caught off guard. I was like, oh my God, this is like still going on. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio was just getting messed up worse and worse and worse. It was an amazing. It's an amazing sequence. I mean, it really is like one of the best of the year.
I mean, even to know that it's coming, I don't think it prepares you fully for it. Because
right,
even, and that's one of the, and that's the credit of kind of even how it's set up, because even building with kind of the early attack on with the Native Americans and whatnot, it kind of sets up very quickly that, like, look, we're out in the middle of nowhere, like danger is everywhere. And with this bear, it happens, when it first happens, it surprises you. I think, yeah, the length and the viciousness is what you cannot be prepared for. So
Yeah.
as it's happening, you're just drawn in, I think, even further. When it first happens, like you could be told, like, oh, there's going to be a bear attack, and you're like, all right, and you sit down and you're on the lookout for it. So when's this bear going to attack? And then when it happens, you don't even think about it anymore because you're just lost in the moment. And that's one of the beautiful things when you have such a fantastic moment in a movie is that your brain, not to say your brain turns off, but it's like it's unaware, like the thought process is gone. Like you're not analyzing it, you're not thinking too hard about it. It's just happening. It's just washing right over you. And that's one of the great aspects of this movie. I think just one of the great aspects of movies, period. Like when something like this is done so well, like you're immersed in it.
Yes, absolutely. I agree completely. I mean, it's one of the one or two top technical, visceral, emotional sequences of any movie that I've seen in the last several months, much less the year.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of really just outside of this, I think just really solid sequences. It's there's some beats here that I think are kind of the high points, and then then it kind of goes into the lull of like just Leonardo DiCaprio camping. But the early Native American attack I think is really fantastic to look at. It's visually impressive. Once again, there's that word. There's a later kind of encounter with the Native Americans where there's a horse chase scene that I think is also really awesome to look at, and that one I think was the one that surprised me almost as much as the bear attack too, sort of with even just how it ends up, because I didn't really see it coming. But visually, those are. The whole movie visually is impressive, and yeah, people who are trying to pirate this movie, like the movie's gonna be lost on you, because half of the real top notch qualities of it is being able to see it on a large screen, projected as big as possible, and kind of just being wowed by how it looks. But I think there are a couple of really fantastic sequences throughout that those are the things that I think help drive you with the movie moving forward, even when the movie doesn't deliver on a number of aspects here and there. I think those are the ones that kind of keep you hoping that things are going to get a little bit better, or that not that it's going to be a movie filled with those moments, but it gives you a taste of how good some of this can really be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, so as far as the Revenant is concerned, kind of mixed. Visually impressive. The bear
I would
attack,
say mixed positive for me.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I would say it's not going to be for everybody. And this is not one of those ones where you're like, hey, let's go out and see the new DiCaprio movie. It's one of those ones where you got to be like. You got to be in the mood to watch it, I think. And then even then, I don't know that you're ever going to find yourself back in the mood to watch it again. But I think if you give yourself over to it for a while, it will do something for you. Just maybe not as much as you think it might.
Yeah.
Our next film that we're going to talk about this week is the stop motion puppet animated it's kind of a hard movie to describe, but it's Anomalisa. This is directed by Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson, and stars David Thewlis, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Tom Noonan. And this is a real interesting movie for us to talk about on a number of levels. But at its most basically what you have is a film with a customer service expert named Michael Stone, who is traveling on a business trip to speak at a conference, kind of just down and out, kind of just melancholy, kind of not feeling life, not feeling people, not feeling anything, really numb to kind of the human experience. And all of that sort of changes with a chance encounter, and you sort of get a new perspective on how he's looking at life, and how we look at life, how we look at happiness. It gets really deep at times, and it's a heavy film. For a movie that you look at on the surface, with its presentation, once again, stop motion animation, puppets, you would expect a little bit lighter fare, just looking at it. But it is not. It is a pretty heavy film. So, Anomalisa, Todd, let's talk about this one. What did this one do for you?
Well, honestly, it did everything for me. I mean, it was sort of. I saw it in September, I guess. After it had premiered, I think at Toronto. I saw it at Fantastic Fest, and I was just sort of astonished at how hard it hit me. Given the fact that I think my previous favorite movie of the year was like Mad Max, this is obviously the complete opposite in terms of theme and even storytelling. But it is such an amazing movie. I mean, sort of my broadest reaction to it was that, there aren't a lot of movies that want to acknowledge with a sort of melancholy resignation, sort of the overpowering sameness of mundaneness of life. And, this is a movie that is about the external sort of physical representation of that, about this person whose life is devoted to helping other people. He's a motivational speaker and a writer about, customer service, how best to communicate with other people to make them feel unique and special and listened to. And, most of the film is about how his entire world is a series of interchangeable faces that are all identical and voices that are identical, and how his life has been reduced to one faceless city with 1,000 of the same face in each of those cities. And how through, like you said, a sort of chance encounter with one individual who is remarkably unexceptional in pretty much every way, how he rediscovers sort of a uniqueness, the uniqueness of another individual in a fleeting and really bittersweet kind of way. I don't know. I mean, like, it was just a thing to me. Not that I certainly have suffered. I mean, it's actually not based literally, but sort of in part on this thing called the Frigoli syndrome, which is that you believe everyone else in the world is one person, and that they're sort of conspiring against you. I mean, it's a psychological disorder. But the movie wasn't trying to do that and to explore that in any sort of medical or scientific way, as much as it was trying to explore the phenomenon, which is that, when you go to work and you come home, or you go through your life, or you have dinner each night, or you do your job, or whatever it is, your life does take on a sameness that can be kind of oppressive. And that to me really, really resonated. As I was watching the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's so beautiful and it's so sad. And look, I saw this movie. The funny thing is, they screened it for myself and my market. This is like a morning screening. This is like a 10:30 in the morning screening. So, like, to sit and just have this film kind of weigh on you at like 10:30 in the morning, I was not prepared for that. And then it kind of ruined the rest of my day, because then you're just sitting around thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, there are so many things that this movie explores, and that, I think, is what is so outstanding about it, is that it does it with puppets. It makes these puppets so human, much more human than films that I've seen with actual human beings in it. Yeah. And explores those emotions that we don't normally explore. The fact that you're watching stop motion animation and puppets, once again, disappears, fades away very quickly as you're watching, because you're lost in the emotion of what they're talking about. You're lost in the experience. And For me, where it really connected with me is kind of this quest for happiness too. This is a guy who's just not happy with his life. He's not happy
Yeah.
with the fact that his life is the same. His marriage isn't all that it's cracked up to be. He's missing the excitement. And I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with their expectations of life, with their expectations of what life is going to be and what their life is going to be. They think it's going to be this amazing thing. They think it's going to be exciting all the time, kind of just a never-ending honeymoon period, where just awesome things happen to them all the time. And you have to realize, like, some days you get up and you go to work and your car doesn't work. And then you got to fix your car. I got to eat lunch. I got to take this. I got to take my kid to practice. I got to do this. And it becomes monotonous. It becomes scheduled. It's less free. It's less exciting. And can that feel smothering? Can that feel like it's just weighing upon you all the time? Absolutely. But I think there comes to be how we cope with that. And I think Michael Stone is kind of the epitome of how a lot of people cope with that, which is to be kind of depressed about it and feel like shit about it and feel lost in their own life, not understanding that sometimes same is okay, not understanding that everything can't be exciting. Not everything's going to feel new all the time, or it's going to smell beautiful all the time. Sometimes it's going to smell same. It's going to look the same, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think too often people are constantly chasing something else. They're chasing something better, chasing something more exciting. And as a result, they're missing the now. They're missing what's actually there. There's a lack of appreciation for what you have, and it's chasing a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're gonna chase that forever, in a number of ways, until you come to grips and understand that your life is what it is. It is whatever you made it to be, and at some point you just kind of gotta accept it and make the best of it.
Yeah, although that recognition, I mean, that recognition is completely the stock and trade of Charlie Kaufman. I mean, as the writer and co-director of this, I mean, he is a person who has historically never shied away from sort of life's unhappier moments and turned them into these sort of borderline whimsical, but always sort of bittersweet. Almost like sci-fi conceits, where and this film is less sort of fantastical than nightmarish, but it is very much about sort of, I always consider him sort of a desperate optimist, and I think there is the idea that, like, oh, there's a person who you meet who can bring you out of that wearying, unrelenting sameness, but at the same time, the recognition that, like, that probably happened to the main character, multiple times in the past, and it has gone away each time. And so he keeps meeting people, or he keeps making these connections, forging these connections with somebody else. And then something happens where, that person fades away and becomes the same. I mean, at the beginning of the movie, he decides to meet up with an ex-girlfriend after, I think it's 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And, and when he meets up with her, he is talking to her over the phone. She sounds the same. And then she shows up and she looks just like everybody else. And, their problems are unfortunately emotionally dramatic. I mean, they're emotionally volatile in terms of her reactions to him and what he wants and trying to connect with her and all these other things. But really, it's a reminder of, like, how that relationship, like every other one in his life before he meets Lisa, was, succumbed to that sameness. And I don't know, it's a thing to me that where, it's like the fact, and then the fact that he meets someone in Lisa who is really so ordinary. I mean, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, like, she is this young woman who is good at her job, but she works in a small town, in the Midwest. Who, he asks her to sing a song, and she sings "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." I mean, it's not like she's, doing anything. She's very sort of average, and yet, there's something just about the fact that her voice and her face is a little bit different that makes her sort of so magical to him. And I think that's very true to life, how it doesn't require a radical shift, a radical introduction of a new, crazy experience in order to sort of shift our perceptions a little bit. It just takes someone who, for whatever reason, we perceive them or they perceive us just a little bit differently than we're used to.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to that idea when people look at like couples together and they go, well, how did they end up together? Just happened. Just one of those. It just happened. Just one of those things. And yeah, I think the character Lisa kind of speaks to that, because she is average. In a world, she is about as just there as possible can be. I mean, there are some things to her that make her unique. She has a scar that she talks about, that she tries to not make a big deal of. She's kind of she's kind of insecure. She has some self-esteem issues, but she also recognizes that. She understands that. She accepts that. She accepts that her friend is the more fun one, the more beautiful one, the one that gets the most attention, and yet that's not the one that connects with Michael. She's the one that connects with Michael for whatever reason. It's just one of those things that the moment hit, and that's how it played out. And and I think their interaction is so interesting because she's the new person that gives him hope that his life can be different, hope that things might change, hope that they're not so boring or so same. And as you mentioned, this is probably an interaction that he has had before. So when they do happen from time to time, he gets excited about it, not once again realizing, I think that's kind of the man in him, not realizing that it's probably going to end up the same as they all do, because once again, that's just life. You can meet somebody new who you're kind of enamored by, or that kind of dazzles you or whatnot. But once that moment is past and you kind of get into like, all right, well now we're back to real life. That stuff is gonna fade away. It's like having a new girlfriend, or getting married, or a new or having a kid, or buying a pet, or a new piece of electronics for Christ's sake. When you first get it, there's a freshness to it. There's a newness to it. This is exciting, and over time, it's not always gonna feel like that. And I think that's where Kaufman and Johnson's film, I think, really hit the hardest for me, is just kind of this understanding of that, this willingness to explore that, because it's these are very real emotions that don't get a lot of press, don't get a lot of public discussion. People kind of just keep those moments to themselves. And I think this is one that kind of blows the door off and say, hey, we all kind of feel like that from time to time, and it's okay. But it's a matter of how you kind of deal with that moving forward that's going to affect your life.
And I think also, the fact, as we mentioned, of course, that it's a stop motion or sort of puppet animation, but the physical externalization of that feeling, of that sameness, in that all of the other characters not only have the exact same modeled face, but that they are all voiced by Tom Noonan, who has this, surprisingly sort of middle of the road, very call it soothing, call it bland, whatever, however you want to characterize it. It has this very sort of neutral aspect to it, that he's acting each character separately, and yet they all end up sounding the same. I think that gives it, that sort of elevates it as well. And you look at the sort of again, the technical aspect of the movie on top of sort of its ideas, I do think that there's a pretty remarkable way that it manages to capture that, so that you can watch the movie and be engaged by its sort of visualization, its conceptualization, and at the same time, like, if you connect with that idea or those feelings, like, then it makes it that much more powerful. It's not just a trick. It's not just like a little technical feat. It's that they've chosen to use this format of filmmaking, this filmmaking style, in order to sort of dig into something. In the same way that, when you think of like Eternal Sunshine and Michel Gondry directing Charlie Kaufman's script, and you watch Jim Carrey run down a street, and he runs down the street one way and it looks the same, and then he turns around and runs back the other way, and in like a continuous cut, the street is somehow like reversed itself, and part of that is like this cool thing where you're like, how did they do that with the camera? How did they pull that off? And at the same time, you're like, this is perfect dream logic or dream representation, and this is very much that way as well.
Yeah, I think the first few minutes are kind of you getting the lay of the land here. Kind of taking in the sights around you. Looking at how the film looks, how the puppets look, and then very quickly, it sucks you right into this world. The puppets are very human in nature. Gestures, just physical tics. I mean, Michael is one of his things. I mean, he's constantly just like kind of just rubbing his brow, just constantly. And you look at it, and it's human in nature, because you people who do those things. So as a result, you're looking at these characters, and you don't see them as puppets, other than right in the beginning. You don't see it, because they just become people who are feeling things that you may be feeling. And on top of that, the Noonan characters, threw me for a loop in the beginning, because David Thewlis gets on the phone, I think, and he's calling his wife from the hotel. And once again, it's kind of slow. You're trying to figure out where this is going, and he calls his wife from the hotel, and Tom Noonan is on the other line, and he's talking to Tom Noonan, who is his wife, which may throw you for a loop at first, until you realize that Tom Noonan is everyone. And I
was going to say, and I think that's actually one of its great strengths, is that they have a scene, he's on a plane, he's sitting next to somebody who's talking to him, and they have Tom Noonan's voice, and you're like, is that and you even, I think initially you're like, a man or a woman, and then you have a cabbie who's saying things that has the same voice, and then you go to the hotel and they have the same voice, and it takes a few moments to sort of get immersed in this world to realize that that's what's going on. I mean, and you're kind of like, because it doesn't present itself in a conscious way, or a deliberate way. It doesn't say to you, oh, everybody's the same. It just introduces the world. You're watching it. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, okay. So everybody looks this way. Everybody talks this way.
Yeah, because he's never conscious of it, or he doesn't recognize it. He doesn't call attention to it. The character never is like, hey, everybody sounds the same. So it takes you a few moments to kind of understand what's happening here, and then once it does, it just kind of becomes matter of fact. This is just how it is, and it's not something that and look, it could easily be it could easily go wrong in the hands of lesser filmmakers. It could easily be something that every time it happened, it just distracted you. But because the film is so good at what it's doing, you pay no attention to it. You just kind of accept it and move on. And look, I can't say enough fantastic things about Anomalisa. I love this movie. Like I said, I think it's incredible to look at. I think it's a beautiful story to tell. It is incredibly sad to watch.
Yeah.
It is, and it's thought provoking. It's introspective. It will get you thinking about yourself. It'll get you thinking about others in your life, how you view your own life, how you view others' life, what you expect from others in your life. Like these are the films that I really respond to because they challenge you. And everybody's going to respond to that challenge differently based off of their own experiences and their own life. But it's not afraid to ask you to think hard about what it's presenting on the screen, to ask you to really consider a number of questions. And that's like, not all films need to be blockbuster entertainment. Sometimes it's perfectly fine for a movie like this to exist that asks you to think about things for a little bit, and this is one that will have you thinking for quite some time about everything that it lays out there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the movies that resonated with me the most this year. I mean, like I said, I watched it a few months ago, and the fact, I mean, it stays with me. It's so vivid in my memory. But I mean, it's probably, if not my favorite movie of the year, it's one the first or second favorite. It's just an amazing movie. It's incredible.
Yeah, for a film that doesn't do a whole lot, it says a whole lot. Like that's
absolutely,
that's kind of really where it's at. So to recap the two films that we talked about here on the show, The Revenant. A mixed bag for both of us, more on the positive end. We're not saying don't see it, but maybe cautiously approach it. If you're expecting just like the typical DiCaprio film, this isn't it. So be prepared for 2.5 hours of pure punishment. If you're ready for that, then go in full guns blazing. But visually impressive. It is an impressive feat of filmmaking. Just for the both of us, emotionally, as far as the story was concerned, something lacking there that just didn't connect. Anomalisa, on the other hand, connected full force with the both of us. Total impact. Just a beautifully sad, thought-provoking film from Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson. This is one that you have to see, and don't look at it as the puppets. The puppet flick. It's not Team America. This is something completely different, and it is a rewarding experience. So Anomalisa, absolutely, from the both of us, be sure to check this out. Todd, before I let you go, let everybody know where it is that they can find your work on the interwebs.
Well, they can go and try to read it in Chinese at mtime.com, but probably more easily they can find me on Twitter at mtgilchrist, mtgilchrist, where I'm usually saying stupid things. And then I take pictures of my cats on Instagram at Best Dressed Todd. And those are probably the easiest places to find my stuff. And what I do sometimes, really just for my friends and colleagues' entertainment, is I will link to one of my M-Time stories and then encourage everyone to do the Google Translate, which translates it into sort of hilariously stilted English. So you can read my reviews there occasionally.
In broken English.
Yes, exactly.
That's easily the way to do it. So,
yeah.
So if you ever have some time to kill and you just want to mess around with Google Translate, well, now you have material to plug in there. You can also follow. Make sure you hit us up on social media. The official Just the Worst podcast Twitter handle at JTW Podcast, and you can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Just the Worst Podcast. I'm on Twitter always as well. Once again, everybody's just tweeting about stupid stuff, and I am as dumb as the rest of them. But that doesn't make it any more interesting or entertaining. So make sure you follow me there at Infamous Kid. And you can follow me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/BillyTheKid. And you can find my work, as always, on JoeBlow.com. This is Infamous. And, of course, right here at Just the Worst Podcast. Be on the lookout year-end top 10, it's going to be out there. So I know it's out there. I've created it. I've concocted it. It's set in stone. So like I'm moving away from it. I'm washing my hands. It's done. It's going to be out there. So be on the lookout for my best of 2015 list. And we'll be back next year. It's next year. In 2016. Next week, I'll be back in 2016 talking about something else to kick off the new year. And since it's going to be January, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be very good. So with that said, I want to thank you, Todd, for joining me on the show, man. It was a blast. I'm glad we were able to finally make the schedules work. So thank you very much.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I'm going to brush up on my Mandarin for the domination of the world. Have yourself a happy new year out there, everybody. Be safe, but have a good time with family and friends, and look forward to that hangover. So with that said, this has been Just the Worst Movie Review Podcast, episode number 14. Be sure to find something out there to go watch. There's always plenty of good stuff if you look hard enough. Other than that, I'm your host, Billy Donnelly. I'm out. Happy New Year. We'll see you later. Peace. Just the Worst Movie Review Podcast, episode number 14, has been a presentation of Just the Worst Podcast Media.